Things begin to heat up. About 100 men picketed the road near Matt's place, a bar in Tomlinson. They stood on both sides of the highway and threw rocks at the cars, headed for Connor Mill, sometimes hitting each other by accident. They were lacking in military leadership, said Wally Sallow. Many car windows were broken. During the strike, the company had 2 guards at its site. One of them was armed with a rifle. Ken John recalls seeing them when he rode the mill with his uncle to pick up loads of slabs. Harry Trezise, editor and publisher of the Wakefield News, gave his opinion of the strike. No other employer of labor has been able to exploit its workers, give so little, and take so much as the woods chopper. Organizers, union officials, and rabble-rousers do not live on public relief. Most of them have the best of food. The union sent telegrams to President Roosevelt and Governor Murphy on the 3rd of June, inviting them to attend the meeting on the 6th of June in Munising. The union wanted relief in negotiations to end the strike. Joe List said if the president found conditions of the lumber camps to be satisfactory, the men would return to work. Governor Murphy ordered the state police to keep a close watch on the situation. On the 5th of June, a state official, Joseph Ashmore, deputy state labor commissioner, announced that the strike would probably end by nightfall. Local strikers were scheduled to meet at 2 p.m. that day and take a vote on returning to work. They and their fellow lumberjacks across the UP rejected the call to return to their jobs. Lumberjacks spurned Ashmore's attempts to mediate. Ashmore deplored the red tactics of strike leaders and had offered the services of the state labor department in assisting the lumberjacks to organize properly. Ashmore was detested by the strikers because of the violent attacks that occurred in Newberry on the 4th of June and outside the Newberry Lumber Chemical Company mill, when about 100 strikers marched to the mill. The town fire whistle blew, and soon close to 900 people came running, well armed with clubs and rubber hoses. The strikers were set upon and chased away. A 52-year-old lumberjack named Joe Catter fell as he tried to escape. An eyewitness said one of the vigilantes clubbed Kist on the head as he tried to get up. There are also rumors of another body being carried away. Liss is reported to have said, since the government permitted the attacks such as that which occurred this morning, the government cannot be trusted. He and his fellow strike committee men then left the Ashmore conference. Ashmore accused Liss and the union of adapting methods that were even too raw for Russia, and wanted to have a representative of the Carpenters and Joiners Union come up from Indianapolis to form a local affiliated with the AFL. Joe Liss immediately became the scapegoat and was arrested and imprisoned in Munising on the 5th of June. Charged with inciting a riot and the death of Joe Catter, tensions ran high in Munising for some time, and vigilantes and special deputies gathered near the American Legion expecting visits from the striking lumberjacks. Henry Paul, a 36-year-old lawyer from Duluth, came to Munising and sought to meet with and served as attorney to Joe Liss. Paul was intensely disliked by the locals because in 1934 he had represented 2 men accused of raising a red flag in Eben. They were charged with criminal syndicalism and sentenced to terms in prison, later appealed. A crowd gathering Munising and shouted, "Tar and feather him!" Paul and his wife, Irene, were given minutes to leave town, or else. He asked for a police escort, and an officer reportedly laughed at his request. Paul later said his wife's presence was probably the only thing that prevented the crowd from assaulting him. Harry K. Bay of Ironwood served as Liss's attorney. Liss got 10 days in jail before his release. There were rumors that the group of lumberjacks were coming from Marinesco to get him out of the Alger County jail. Steve Pavlovich transported the union leaders during the strike and gave this account of his experience. I had a 1934 Chevrolet ton-and-a-half truck. I used to work on WPA with it, and I put a dump box and a stake body on it. I drove some of the men to Munising one time. It took us pretty near all day to get there. Years ago, they had gravel roads, muddy and everything, so we drove all day and got to Munising at night, to a camp this side of town. Then the next day we went on into town and stayed there for about a week, for a convention, and I went out with the gang and to the old logging camps and checked the places. Matt Savala, Elmer Marks, Pete Nicholson, John Ziegler, and quite a few others. There must have been about 10 or 15 people. We returned and I had a Model A coupe. I went out from the dark to dark and collected money, flour, sugar from places in Gogebic and Ontonagon counties. Matt Savala went with me, or Johnny Ziegler. Then we went on to Escanaba. A group of guys Model A coupe hauled about 4 guys in it. We were in Escanaba in about a week. Johnny Capo took his dad's 37 Ford and drove 4 guys. I was on the road all the time. I went to Ontonagon for a little convention. Before you get on the road to Ontonagon, a mile or two down the side, they had a big haul. Somebody burned a cross nearby the night we were there. They were against the strikers. We slept on wooden floors and newspaper for covers. We stayed there about a week. I must have put thousands of miles in that truck. William Ruhan, general manager of the Mass Cooperative Store, testified that a group of vigilantes came to Green Hall on June 13th, but they found that the Lumberjacks had plenty of clubs, so they didn't attack. The strikers had been trading in our stores. We had extended them a little credit. He said somebody stated that all Mass Cooperatives needs to get a good load of dynamite. Ruhanen's testimony is interesting for what it says about the vigilante activity in the neighborhood, Ontonagon County. He said a meeting was held in the Ontonagon Memorial Building following the incident at Green Hall, and 65 people formed a vigilante committee. He said he knew several parties who were invited to join the vigilantes. Each member was a group of 5 new members to the next meeting. Ruhanen named Roy Muscat, possibly connected with the local American Legion post, as being captain of the committee. The apparent connection between the American Legion and the vigilantes was later to be repeated in the Gogebic County. Following the disaster in Newberry, the National Labor Relations Board was called upon to help settle the strike. The jobbers were skeptical about whether or not the strikers were in the majority and entitled to the bargaining agent. The jobbers requested a strike holiday and immediately returned to work. During the holiday, the lumber and sawmills workers could go back to work and vote to designate their bargaining agency to make their demands. The strikers rejected this offer through their attorney. On the week of the 13th of June, the American Legion in Wakefield adopted a resolution stating its readiness to defend American institutions and property from the assault of agitators and others who seek to create strife and idleness. It was passed with little debate and carried uproariously and unanimously. The Legion called upon the able-bodied members to help the police. During the following week, the Wakefield Rotary Club struck at mob rule and denounced un-American activities. A revolution was introduced by John Thomas, a high school principal. The revolutionary father, Thomas Drenges, spoke in favor of it. Logging trucks soon began hauling logs after the 4-week interruption. The Gogebic sheriff was prepared to patrol the roads and ensure there was no interference with the logging operations. Strike. June 20th, local relief recipients were slated to receive. The strikers had headquarters in Marinesco, Bessemer, and Ironwood. Marinesco was friendly towards the strikers, and many of the men were allowed to camp in people's yards. The Lumberjacks had a barracks and soup kitchen set up in the Thomas Pavlovich property on Fair Avenue in Marinesco. The men didn't have much to eat, according to Rosie Brown. Steve Pavlovich, son of Thomas and Mary Pavlovich, described the soup kitchen and his parents' property as being 50 by 50 feet at the end of the yard. My folks had a big building in the front yard. The Lumberjacks built it out of logs. They put tables in it. There was enough for about 100 people to eat. Local women came and helped the strikers, cooking and all that stuff. My dad was short Tom Pavlovic. The soup kitchen had garage doors in at one end of it, so they stood open most of the time. Some farmer would give the Lumberjacks half a cow or something like that, and they would get 1 or 2 day-old bakery. They used to get blocks of ice from people who put up ice. They didn't have refrigerators in those days. They only had 1 meal a day. Some Lumberjacks slept on the ground or beneath the old town water tower like hobos, or stayed in the homes of friends. 2 or 3 Lumberjacks stayed at Jordan Cox's place, but got into a scrape with each other and left. We had a building there made of cedar logs and other place across the creek. The Contero family donated bushels of potatoes in the soup kitchen every once in a while. You didn't dare show too much appreciation to Lumberjacks or you'd be blackballed. You had to do it on the sly or else they cut off your income. Rosie Brown gave this account. We had a bunkhouse behind our tavern in Marinesco, and during the strike, we let about 10 lumberjacks stay there. I used to tell them, don't go down there, where the strikers were picketing, because the guys would get clubbed. North Star Hall in Ironwood and the Palace Hall were served as quarters for lumberjacks. Lumberjacks in Bessemer stayed at the old Swede Finn Hall, which was located in the east of the southeast corner of 3rd Avenue and Hematite Street, across the street from Eric Erickson's residence. Marko Vukovic was just a schoolboy at the time and said to his father, told him to stay away from the Swede Finn Hall. The lumberjacks were a tough bunch of people. They had cases of beer and drank moonshine, shouting and singing. They were lumberjacks. What do you expect? My father told me to run fast when I came home from school. Don't stop and talk to them. They had fires going in the burn barrels at night. Miss Louisa Erickson died after a long illness, passing away on the 23rd of June in 1937. Her nephew Elmer Erickson recalled how the lumberjacks staying in the Swede Finn Hall across the street showed their respect by removing their hats and placing their hands over their hearts when her casket was carried out of the house. You never saw a better bunch of men, he said, although some people at the time considered them to be nothing more than an uncouth mob. Eric Erickson donated meat to the Booyah. Vivian Coleman said that she could remember her parents talking about the plight of lumberjacks in Marinesco, underpaid and bad conditions. As we understood it, they were trying to form a union under the CIO. My dad said there must have been a dozen or more lumberjacks who came from Marinesco, some on foot. Finnish Halls played an important role in the lumberjack strike of 1997. Cavisto states that in the early part of the 20th century, socialists were established in every town and city where a significant number of Finns resided, creating the system of dual hall characteristics of the Finnish-American community nationwide. The halls used by lumberjacks during the strike were all the local socialist and communist groups. The strikers over in Alger County stayed in one where a picture of Joseph Stalin hung on the wall. In the book, Communist Movement, Storming Heaven Itself, the author states that Finnish-American communism revolved around some 220 radical Finnish cultural clubs, and many of the Finnish clubs owned a building, the Finn Hall, with meeting rooms, a library, a stage, a kitchen, and this hall served as headquarters for the lumberjacks during the strike, and communists like John Mackey were connected with both the strike and the halls. The Palace Hall, on the northwest corner of Pewabic and Suffolk Street in Ironwood, was a huge building, according to K.O. O'Brien. There was a combination communist-socialist meeting place, gymnasium, and dance hall. Margaret McKivitt said, we used to run by there when they were having May Day celebrations. It was considered very daring to go up to the porch and look in the door. The building was painted red. The strikers were dispersed all across the county, in order to do picket duty along the roads traveled by logging trucks. Luke Rake was complained to William Houston, a representative of the Department of Labor, that jobbers were raped by bringing in strike breakers from Wisconsin and other states. The lumberjacks were picketing in the vicinity of County. They had brought in outsiders to serve as pickets. A man who wishes to remain anonymous told of transporting lumberjacks to the dump truck. In the morning, they all meet at the union office in Marinesco. I picked them up before sunrise, and they lay down in the back of my truck so nobody could see them. There'd be half a dozen men, and I'd drop a couple off here and there, and a couple off there, and the lumberjacks would hide in the woods with their rifles and shoot the tires of logging trucks, and logging truck couldn't move. The drivers would have to walk home. The lumberjacks didn't hurt anybody, I don't think. Not that I heard. Lumberjacks shot out one or two tires on the Honen's trucks and told the driver not to come back and get it, because they'd be watching. The truck sat on the side of the road for several days. They'd have to settle the strike before they got any logs. Louis Contiero said, the mill hands at the Boniface Mill in Marinesco were told to go scabbing in the woods or they wouldn't be rehired. They bring in men to work in the woods, didn't turn, and soon left the area. John E. McNicholson of Marinesco was a jobber who operated the camp of the Cisco branch east of Marinesco. McNicholson, born in County Mayo, Ireland, in 1880, was a supervisor and Marinesco Township official. Grace Graves said she remembered him as being a refined gentleman who always gave you the impression of being in things. He used to transport lumberjacks from his camps into town on election days, so it made it possible to help contribute to his vote tally. Bob Anderson recalled, John McNichols hated those strikers, and he hated Roosevelt and anything related to the Democratic Party. He remembered the story about McNicholas going to the store one day to purchase some shaving cream. All they had was Menon. He couldn't buy it because it reminded him of old G. Menon Williams, the Democratic governor of Michigan. In late June 1937, McNicholas expressed concern about an epidemic of disease because of inadequate sanitary conditions in the housing facilities used by the striking lumberjacks. A public health official came in to investigate the conditions and reported there was no basis for the charges that lumberjacks swarming into Marinesco were endangering public health. The lumberjacks have been cooperative in the matter of sanitation, and there is no serious health problem in the village.